Today on The State of Us, 6 big questions to ask yourself about the transition to renewables. The issue of alternative energy raises difficult questions. The transition from fossil fuels to cleaner energy will involve disruptive changes, according to a Wall Street Journal report on energy. This raises questions about which technologies to choose, how fast to move, the government's role, and who will bear the costs and the risks. Today, we're going to look at a set of big questions to ask ourselves. And the article goes so far as to point out that the goal isn't to come up with a right or wrong answer, but to think about some of the questions that we must ask now. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson.
Well, here we go, because this is all a great idea, but do we have enough to power the grids? Do we have enough to take care of everybody? Do we have the infrastructure? I mean, it's all a great idea, and I'm all for saving the planet, but do we have in place what we need, or are we going into this not necessarily blindly, but not as prepared as we should be? I think that is the big question that I would like to answer as we go into today's show. Do we just move forward and hope things work out, or do we have an actual plan?
So we're also going to have Levi, our intern today, join us for helping to answer a couple of the questions, because there's one in particular. We're not going to follow the order that the article initially lays out. They also spell out 10 questions, folks. We don't have time to get to all 10, so we're just going to get to as many of the ones that Justin has deemed most important to talk about. Maybe not most important, but the most fruitful to a conversation. I think they're all important questions, but there's some that are more pressing than others. So the question that we're going to start with is actually 2 questions. Should consumers get to use as much fossil fuel created energy as they want if they can afford it? What do you think, Levi? I'm not going to ask you the second part of the question yet, because it depends on what you say to the first part. Should consumers, you're a consumer, right? Should you be allowed to use as much fossil fuel created energy as you want to use if you can afford it? So if you can buy it, you can use as much as you want. No restrictions.
I don't think so.
Okay. You don't think so? Why?
Oh, because fossil fuels are bad for the environment.
Okay.
Are you guessing, or you think that?
That's what I've heard.
Oh, okay.
That's what it is.
I see. All right.
That's what people tell him. So the second part of this question, Levi, do we owe anything to future generations who may be affected by climate changes caused before their time?
Definitely.
He's a lot more certain about that one than the first one. All right. Now we're going to turn to the other end of the spectrum. We're going to crank Father Time back here and turn it over to the friendly redneck liberal. Should consumers get to use as much fossil fuel created energy as they want if they can afford it?
Yes.
Oh, we got
See?
the opposing dynamics.
I didn't say what it would cost, right? You never put a cost on it. You can raise it, gasoline to $10 a gallon, and make people then choose whether or not they can afford it. There's all kinds of variables.
That nice caveat in
there's
the
a whole
question
kinds
about
of variables
if they
in
can
the
afford
question. Exactly, right? Nobody said it has to be subsidized by the government and be able to sell at the low price that it is right now. You can do all kinds of things and affect the price of fossil fuels, and then people would have to decide whether or not they wanted, if they could afford it, and what they would have to do in their life. But to limit people on spending their money the way they want to spend it, that's just wrong. That's just as a basis.
So, I think part of
can I answer the second part of his question too?
Yes, yeah. Do we owe anything to future generations?
Yes, we do. But I have a real problem because I work with young people pretty much on a daily basis, and they don't recycle or do anything. They just throw everything in the trash. The majority of them that I see, they don't care about the future. So while I'm recycling everything and picking through their trash to pull out the recyclable items, they just go ahead and waste and throw things away and don't recycle. And so I'm supposed to, I can understand where people who are older say, well, why should I care when the younger generation doesn't care? And don't give me, Greta over in Europe who's, going to jail because she believes in it.
There are those that care. There are those that don't care.
Exactly. Right. So for people then to shame me because I'm older and I'm leaving them a bad planet. Well, sometimes there's a saying, physician, heal thyself. You do something about it as your generation.
Well,
because not everybody in your generation gives a care on the environment. So don't blame us.
Well, we actually did, I think, a recent show where we talked about polling on
just wanted to get that off my chest.
The generations, and actually found that millennials were, the most environmentally conscious. But the thing that was concerning,
you guys are
the thing that was concerning was exactly what you shared, though, is that the generation behind us, you would think, should be more that way, not less that way. But what the data says is they're not. Again, to your point. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not, that on the whole, right, that there's a whole bunch of them that just don't care. There are more of them that don't care than millennials. But I would say that goes back to the responsibility of the generations who are making the decisions about how we educate people and what resources and how we're teaching our young people. Are we spending time to educate on that? If we're going to say that climate change is the biggest existential crisis facing us as a race, that we know of in the next century or two, then why are we not spending any time teaching what you can do about it?
Well, why isn't it being done at home?
I agree.
Local
teaching can happen at
governments
home too.
Local governments have made it simple to recycle. They give you in most municipalities,
Mm-hmm. They give you a mixed recycling container.
Yeah, they give you a container, and all you have to do is throw that in there, and then every week take it out with your trash. It can't get any simpler than that.
Agree. Well, and a lot of times, depending on the municipality you live in, you're paying for that recycling service. You know what I mean?
Whether you use it or not.
Whether you use it or not. Like whether you fill up your thing every week or you don't ever put it out for 10 weeks in a row, you're paying for it. And some people are always surprised when I tell them that. But I've told people that in our community when they say they don't recycle, I'm like, what? But you're paying every month on your water bill. You pay a recycling fee. So why aren't you using your,
right?
Because if it lessened your trash, I don't have folks, because of our recycling, because of the amount that we're able to recycle, when you pay attention to, what the company says they will accept, we don't even have trash service at our house because I own other properties. We have one centralized dumpster, and maybe about once a week or once every 2 weeks, I'll load up 1 to 2 bags of trash that we have that just sit in the garage and just take them to the dumpster because it's so marginal that paying for curbside trash service really is not worth it. So yeah, to the point of it's crazy when you live in municipalities where that happens, and maybe we have some listeners that could shed some light on, I guess, that perspective, because I would like to understand it better. Now, I will say that on my street, at least, and I try to pay attention on recycling day, pretty much everybody's got a bin out. You know what I mean? Like you might see 1 or 2 houses that don't, but usually that's not because they don't use it. It's just they didn't put it out that week. You know what I mean? There have been weeks, for example, where ours isn't full yet. So I'm just like, well, I don't need to wheel it out there to empty it when I...
Too much work?
Yeah, too much.
Walk it to the end of the driveway each week?
On its wheels. Anyway, to answer the questions, should consumers get to use as much fossil fuel as they want? I guess I agree with Lance's semantic approach of there are ways to de-incentivize it that allow you the technicality of you can still buy what you want. Now, are we going to price out a lot of people? Absolutely. Is that the goal? Yep, it sure is. If you can still afford it, can you buy it? I guess so. But I don't know. I guess that to me, that one's kind of...
that's capitalism.
Yeah.
That's supposedly what we live in.
That's right. I mean, like, for example, we've talked about one of the first steps you can do, depending on what you feel about this, is just end all government subsidies for the oil and gas industry. Over. You are not doing anything to affect the price other than saying the government is no longer going to provide aid for drilling. We're no longer going to provide aid for transportation. We're no longer going to subsidize pricing. We're no longer going to provide you grants or opportunities to help with your emission reduction requirements. We're just done helping you, Now, you're welcome. There's still laws in place about what you have to do, like, for example, coal-fired plants have certain restrictions on how much they're allowed to emit into the atmosphere, well, that's on you to figure out. And you say, well, that's going to cost X, Y, Z. Okay, well, then I guess you'll have to pass that along to the consumer. And then I guess the consumer will have to decide whether or not the fuel is still worth it.
And everybody's electric bill will quadruple,
right.
And you'll decide whether or not you actually need air conditioning or not.
And the second one, I think we're pretty much all in agreement on this show of, do we owe anything to future generations? Absolutely. And we don't owe, it's not just future generations. We owe it to ourselves. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, lately, but we owe it to ourselves. Things are not going to get better if we just keep turning and looking the other way. So, yes, there's different age ranges where it's going to matter more. Like, there's probably time, if we get really serious really quick, for me to see some of those results. There's definitely time for Levi. Is there as much time for Lance to see said results? It depends.
But like I said, I've been recycling since I was 12 years old.
Right.
I mean, I've used the story before where I delivered newspapers Monday through Saturday. And then on Saturday mornings, I went around with my wagon and collected the newspapers that I had delivered and recycled them at the local place in Columbus that, paid me $1 per 100 pounds, for newspapers, loaded up the station wagon and did that. So, I mean, So I don't know whether that's helped the result or not, but to me,
I think we changed as a society, and we've talked about that before too. There used to just be a mindset, and I don't think it was environmental as much as it just was.
But there was no recycling, other than we did that on your own,
right?
There was none of this government
But I meant you recycled because
program.
You don't throw away something that can be used again,
right?
And
but now we're a throwaway society,
right? Exactly.
It's cheaper for me to buy a new printer than it is to get the ink for the printer.
Yeah. I explained that to somebody the other day. The amount you spend on certain printers to replace the laser cartridges is more than if you bought the new printer with the sample cartridges that come with it.
Yeah.
It's like,
and then you wonder why we have, issues with overflowing landfills.
There's an engineer that was on America's Got Talent who's a comedian, or trying to be a comedian. And he did this great thing about explaining the cost per ounce of printer ink is more expensive than human blood. Like, you can buy human blood by the ounce cheaper than printer ink. Isn't that crazy? And his whole thing is like, what do they put in this stuff? Because what is in this stuff that makes it so expensive? If we have any listeners out there that work at a printer ink manufacturer, maybe you could tell us, what the heck? Because how is blood cheaper?
What about the process makes it so expensive?
Yeah, crazy. Anyway, we've got more questions to ask. The big one that we're going to spend some time on next, because there's a kind of a set of 3 questions around this, is electric vehicles. This is the one that's stirring a lot of people's pot right now. So keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. We're going to start with this one. Do environmental concerns motivate you to consider buying an electric vehicle? Levi. Do environmental concerns motivate you to consider buying an electric vehicle?
Yeah.
So you'd consider it.
Yeah.
Okay. The follow-up is, if so, how much more are you willing to pay for it? Would you pay $1,000 more? $5,000 more? $10,000 more?
As much as I do care about the environment, I don't know if I go to big financial standards.
So how much more would you be willing to spend? Say that you're at the point where, you're ready to buy a new vehicle. Granted, Levi just got, his first car, so he's probably not looking to do anything super soon. But say you're going to look for a new vehicle and you said that you want to consider, right, an EV. So would you be willing to spend $1 more, $500 more, or no, it has to be priced equivalent to what I would spend for a gas vehicle? And there's no wrong answer. I'm asking because this is important. We have our Gen Z representative here today.
I mean, sure. As long as it's not something that's too crazy that I won't be able to.
Well, what's too crazy in your mind?
Double, triple.
Okay, so as long as it's not double, then it's open to consideration. So, friendly redneck liberal, do environmental concerns motivate you to consider buying an EV?
Oh, I've considered it. Yes, in the last 5 to 6 years, I've considered it.
So the follow-up, if so, how much more would you be willing to spend?
I won't.
You will not spend more.
Right. Well, I know I won't buy one.
Oh, well.
Not because of the cost,
right,
and not because of the environment.
Yes.
I have other reasons.
What are those other reasons?
Well, we have not taken care of the infrastructure to where I can travel the way that I want to travel. My life is not conducive to having that vehicle and taking care of it to the point of getting it charged to do and travel the way I want to. And we as a society and a government have not put the time and the effort into making that available, nor do we have the batteries. It's just like back, and I know you guys don't remember this, but it was beta and VCR tapes, and beta was better, and everybody invested in beta, and then everybody bought VCRs because they were cheaper and better. Then we got DVDs, and now we stream and all that kind of stuff. But I still think we're on the cutting edge, and nobody's made any commitment to how we're all going to travel and how we're all going to do this. And okay, so everybody buys an electric car. So then everybody tries to charge at all these new chargers that are out there, and they're not available. And, you've tried to convince me, well, when you travel, there's 1 or 2 at every hotel. Okay, if there are 100 patrons in the hotel and everybody has an electric car, not everybody's going to get to charge. So how do we get up in the morning and go to our next destination or work in that town? We have not taken care as a nation of a way for us to travel the way we travel with being able to power these cars.
Well, the way some of us travel.
And that's the way, okay, but a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Even if you're a business person and you travel for business, right? And you fly and you get a rental car and you stay at the hotel. If there were multiple cars that were all trying to use the hotel's charger, you would not be able to get up the next day and go do your business.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and we've talked about
make your sales calls.
We've talked about this before with EVs. I mean, one thing is, the good news on this front is that the government is investing literally tens of billions of dollars into changing part of this dynamic that Lance is speaking of, which is making these options more readily accessible. On the other hand, there is I think when we talk about this debate, for a lot of Americans, there is an in-between too, folks. And I'm an example of what the in-between is because it's what I did when I first got an EV. You don't have to give up most, if you live in a house in America, there's probably 2 cars in your household. You don't have to give up your gas-powered car. You can keep a gas-powered vehicle and still get an EV. So if you're uneasy, leery, I don't know about road trips, fine. Keep your gas-powered vehicle, get rid of one of them, and use your daily commuting vehicle, your errand vehicle, your run-around vehicle as an EV. That will drastically cut your contribution to emissions and still give you the freedom and flexibility that you've always had anytime you take off in a gas-powered vehicle. So there is an in-between. Now, is that ideal? Because I'm sure there's probably people listening who are on the environmental side, like, well, you can't advocate for people to keep, No, I'm not saying forever, but I'm saying that is a interim solution. And it's a very doable one. It makes serious strides because the majority of everybody's emissions each year come from their daily commuting and errands, okay? So it's not the road trips that usually cause the majority of what we each contribute on an annual basis Well, I don't contribute, but what other people contribute to their CO2 emissions.
No,
from
you
their
just
commute.
call me and ask me to do the errands that you need done.
That's right.
With a vehicle bigger than what you drive.
I don't want to spend the money yet because, but that's another good example. Going back to that question of,
How much would you
spend? I'm not willing to spend what it would take to have a truck yet because mainline truck production has not gotten the price yet down to similar gas-powered truck models. The next question here is California has a 2035 deadline to phase out gas car sales. Should the federal government mandate a countrywide phase out of gas car sales? And if so, how far into the future is reasonable? Levi?
Environmentally, yes.
I'm asking you. You're king. We've done away with this silly democracy system we've got, and we've anointed Levi king of the universe and in charge of the United States. You have to make this decision. What do you do?
For the environment, yeah.
So, in your opinion, is 2035 too soon? Because you said we need to phase it out. So, for you, Levi, is 2035 too soon? About right? Too far away? It should be sooner.
Truly, I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Why are you uncertain about it?
Well, until it's too late. So I guess sooner is better.
If you were
2035.
If you were being purely selfish, right?
Yeah.
I think the answer would be, since you just got a pretty good condition gas-powered vehicle, you're not going to need a new car for quite some time.
No.
So if you were being just strictly selfish, you would say, well, right now, like do it today, because doing it today would force the industry to get better at producing these, bring down the cost, get the infrastructure in place. So it'd be a nightmare for a lot of people, right? But not for you, because you got your car and you're good for 5-10 years, no problem, because nobody's going to stop you from buying gasoline, and there's still going to be the majority of people on the road are still going to be driving gas-powered vehicles. But everybody that wants to go get a new car is going to have to get an EV.
Yeah, but then there's the mass manufacturing problem. It's emitting gases into the air when it's manufacturing. Why aren't we talking about that?
Well, we can talk about that. All right, Lance, your turn. What do you think? Should the Fed mandate a countrywide phase out of gas car sales?
Yes, 2050.
By 2050. So 2035, which is California, is a little bit ambitious, but say we're giving everybody 27 years, 26 years, and it's coming. There will be no more gas-powered car sales by 2050.
Well, and what it does is it allows for the infrastructure and for the manufacturers to start producing the cars. Right. Because right now, if you did it quickly, there aren't enough cars being produced. And so now, law of supply and demand, your whole premise of trying to get the cost down is not going to take place.
Well, you'll have the inverse initially. The cost will skyrocket because the only new vehicle you can buy is in such short supply that everybody that wants a new vehicle can't get.
And so then what are you doing with all those people? Then again, now we turn into a third world country who have old American cars who are still run on leaded gasoline or even unleaded gasoline, but you have to keep it running and you pay more for it because you can't afford a new car because there aren't enough of them being produced.
Think about this question during the break. Should consumers receive incentives to buy electric vehicles? And if not, should owners of gas-powered vehicles pay a fee for their impact on the environment? Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. I like this question because initially when I read it, I'm like, man, this is the age old, how many times has this question been asked and answered? Should consumers receive incentives to buy electric vehicles? Probably most people listening have some kind of feeling about that. However, if your answer is no, then you need to answer the next part of the question, which is, should owners of gas-powered cars pay a fee to account for the environmental damage of their cars?
No and no.
No and no.
Yep.
No and no. So consumers should not receive incentives, and people killing the planet shouldn't have to pay any extra.
Right.
Got it.
The only incentive that should come is the incentives that car dealers historically have had. It's like right now. I know you guys don't watch, cable television because you stream everything and you probably binge and don't, fast
I don't have
forward
a cable subscription
through the commercials. Right. Sure. Because I understand that. But if you did, to all of us old people who have money who want to spend it, now's the time when the auto manufacturers are offering their big sales because they're trying to get rid of the 2023 models that are still sitting on their lots and to make room for the 2024s. So there's automatically, through the law of supply and demand, deals that can be had on cars. So that's the reason why there doesn't need to be a government subsidy. If you're producing enough cars that there's enough for everybody who wants one, then the deals will automatically take place. And secondly, that's a tax that I'm not in favor, because they already tax me to drive my gas-powered car.
Should we subsidize the vehicles? I mean, I agree with Lance's answer to the extent of, I don't think that the tax credits are the way to go. My experience with them is that they are not as valuable as they seem like they are, and they help the manufacturers basically not become as economical as
Gouge
they should as
the
fast
consumer?
as, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, tax money. So but I think we should still provide the incentives, grants, research, that type of stuff. The things that we've historically done, those should still be provided, to the car companies. So I'm not saying that part needs to change, but as far as an incentive to consumers to say, buy these vehicles, I don't think, the problem is that the people that can use the incentive, right, probably don't need the incentive. And then everybody else that gets the incentive can't use it, or it's not as valuable to them, or they don't know how to use it. So maybe there's a better incentive, but as far as direct tax credits, I'd say no. But this one we're going to get Levi's answer to first, because I don't want him to be predispositioned by anything that Justin or Lance might say. Levi, should nuclear power play a bigger role in energy production?
No.
Why not?
Because of the environment. It's still putting an environmental impact on the earth.
Okay. Well, I mean, in fairness, all forms of energy place an environmental impact on the earth, right? But
that's true. Okay. But in the case of a worst case scenario.
So
what would that look like?
The second part then of the question is part of what matters to you. How big a risk of a catastrophic accident would be acceptable? And your answer is, there isn't one.
It's a hard question. There's always going to be some sort of negative impact, even if you think you're doing something good. So there's always going to be another side of the coin.
I don't know if we got an answer though to that question. So
very cliche-ish.
It's hard to put an answer.
It is hard. But you're king. You got to answer the question. They come to you, Levi. Are we building more nuclear or not?
Maybe in deserted, isolated places that nobody inhabits in the near radius of 25,000 miles.
If we do that, how are we going to get the power back to where the people are?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know.
Because you're right. One of the answers that people have come up with is, well, we'll just put them where nobody lives. Yeah. And then if something terrible happens, it's not that big a deal.
Acid rain.
Oh, yeah.
Nuclear fallout.
Yeah.
The wind. Come on, guys.
And no matter how far away you put it, you still have the obligation of what to do with the nuclear waste, the spent nuclear fuel, when it's done. Which the only answer that we have at the moment is to bury it in a mountain.
No, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, nuclear waste, the super funds that we're trying to clean it up now because we put them in metal containers underground, and now the nuclear waste is seeping into the groundwater all across the country. And it's just, we haven't figured out how to harness it for the safety of the planet. So I understand, the Zimmerman nuclear power plant in Cincinnati that was being built and had to be stopped because there were so many design flaws by the contractor that was building it. So everybody says, well, we're going to have computers, we're going to have robots, and we'll take the human No, there will always be the problem for human error because humans are programming everything that's being done. And I just think it's too dangerous. And it's causing too many problems that, as you said, we're pushing off on future generations. And the whole point of this show, as I listened to your questions, was how are we going to do things better in the future?
The potential for nuclear energy has always been and remains enormous because you can produce by far and away of every energy source that we've ever discovered on this planet or ever invented or created. You can produce many, many thousand times more energy in way less space with nuclear than you can with anything else. The other side of that comes to that you also have, in terms of catastrophic accidents, the worst possible catastrophic accident. The other side of that, which is what we always bring up when we have this show, is that two things. One, what do we do about the nuclear that we've already got? In this country, the United States, 18.2% of our electricity is coming from nuclear power plants. Some of the electricity powering the very studio we're sitting in right now is probably coming from nuclear. You can't just get rid of 18% of the grid and say everything's going to be okay tomorrow. So you could say, no, we're not going to build any more. What do we do with what we already got? Because if we're not building more, if we're not investing in the research to make the technology better, then I guess the technology that's here, are we paying attention to make sure that we avoid some of those terrible potential situations? Or because there's no investment in the long term of this energy source, now, well, we're going to keep using it, but the companies that operate it aren't interested in providing the long-term investments that are needed to provide for its safe operation beyond what the government says they have to do. And the last thing, Levi, I would tell you is, I ask you, because I think it's a good question for all of our listeners to ponder. What energy source would you guess has the most deaths associated with it globally on an annual basis? What energy, forget global, forget annual basis, just what energy source causes the most deaths on an ongoing basis? What contributes to the killing of the most people on planet Earth by energy sources?
Well, you'd think the nuclear power plants, but
now what's included in this, just so that we're clear, death rate from accidents and pollution. Okay. So this is measured by deaths per terawatt hour of electricity. So how much energy is being produced relative to how many people die to produce said energy.
It's a trick question.
What's used the most?
On terms of which type?
It's either coal or gas.
Coal makes up 36% of global electricity. Okay. We're talking about electricity production specifically right now. Okay. So coal makes up 36% of global electricity production and is also the highest contributor to deaths. The way this is done, this is by the Our World in Data folks, okay? They took data from multiple studies from 2007 through 2021 across multiple energy sources and compiled this information. They do an extrapolation here to show you that regardless of the share of global energy, how many deaths are related from accidents and pollution for each type of energy source. Coal comes in at the top with 24.6 deaths, oil at 18.4 deaths, biomass at 4.6 deaths, natural gas at 2.8 deaths, hydropower at 1.3 deaths, wind energy at 0.04 deaths, nuclear energy at 0.03 deaths, and solar energy at 0.02 deaths. So in terms of just the safest option, solar, right, wins the day in terms of being the single safest energy source related to human deaths.
See Mr.
From
Jackson
accidents and air
shaking his
pollution.
head.
And then
It's a misrepresentation of the facts.
no, this one is accounting for it. It has nothing to do with which are most
because
used.
when all the nuclear waste seeps out and kills millions and millions of people 100 years from now, that number will be bogus. It's the safest now because it's not killing people now, but it's also the most likely to kill people in the future and to kill a lot more people than the other stuff. So it's a misrepresentation of the numbers.
So the part of the issue, and one of the things the article points out about nuclear, is there's a lot of things that are complicated to account for. You know, some of these things are, if it goes wrong, if it fails, then this. And most people agree that in those situations, awful, terrible, absolutely cataclysmic. On the other hand, it comes back to the question of, should we be done with nuclear? We started with our first version of nuclear, which we decided wasn't very safe. We came up with a safer version, which is substantially better and accounts for the way that most nuclear energy is produced now across the world. Should we still be investing in it? Is it worth time and money to invest in? We did an article, a year ago on some of the research that's going into, well, what if we could figure out how to get rid of the nuclear waste, reuse it, use it to power other things and prevent us from burying it and having no plan for what happens when it, if and when it leaks, degrades, whatever it might be, into the environment. The theory, and the issue is we don't know, right? Because the nuclear waste hasn't been around long enough, is what we bury it in right now, the containers will outlast the radioactivity life of the material itself. So if that's true, which again, all we can do is scientific projections because, nobody's been around for 10,000 years to check, then it's probably okay. Should we spend more time, money, research on nuclear power, Levi, or are our efforts better focused in other places?
If we can get it to be safer, yeah.
Oh, broad question.
Yeah.
Tricky question. You use the term we don't have time to get into, but safer, right? How do we want to measure it? Because if we measure it by death rate from accidents and air pollution today, well, how much safer do you want it to be? It's safer than wind, But to Lance's point, if we measure it 10,000 years from now, it might be the thing that killed the human race. So Lance, more time, energy, money into the investment of research into nuclear power? Or is the time, money, and energy spent better other places?
I think it's better in other places like wind and solar.
Very good. So why do we do the show today? What was the point?
Because True Chat has a mission, and that mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we've tried to do that today on a very controversial issue. Let us know how you feel about it. Send us an email at podcast@stateofus.org. Tell your family and friends, and if they want to listen as a podcast, they can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us releases new episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. First thing in the morning, those new episodes are available. Those same episodes can be heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States and parts of Canada. I would point out that the consensus on today's program is that we have to do more with renewables, because notice that none of the discussion was focused on whether or not climate change is a real problem or not. How we deal with it is a whole other ball of wax, and there's a lot of different feelings about that. Let us know your thoughts. Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. Special thanks to producer Levi LaForge and producer Bradley Butch. I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Thank you to our audience for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.